B.B. King is one of the great American blues players, one of the seminal players. And not long ago, I heard a rap song where they sampled some of his guitar playing and used it in the song as a backup. So there you go. You know, it just pervades all sorts of different music now. And we don't really know where it came from. You know, we have ideas about it. But the thing about the blues is that it's really a folk music to begin with. So the folk style is not to write things out musically like that, but you do it as an oral tradition. I sing a song for you, you remember it, maybe you can play an instrument and sing, and so you sing it and somebody else picks it up, and this is the process, you know. So it has developed that way, and it developed that way for quite a while. We don't know how long. We really don't know where blues began. We do know that its roots are in West Africa, and the people that were unfortunately brought here as slaves had certain forms and certain scales of music that they brought with them. Of course, that was their music. So they were allowed, you know, with little free time those folks had, they were allowed to sing and maybe play a guitar if there was one around, or they might makeshift an instrument. They weren't allowed drums because plantation owners felt that this could be a way for them to talk to other people at a distance. So drums were forbidden. Obviously, they couldn't have a piano. So guitar was very popular, banjo was very popular, fiddle was very popular, and some other instruments, and of course the voice. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. This is called Sweet Home Chicago, and I wish, if you know this at all, that you'd sing it along with me. That would be a lot of fun for me. And it's going to go like this. Well, come on, baby, do you want to go? Come on, baby, do you want to go? I mean that living life city, my sweet home Chicago. Well, 1 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4. Heavy loaded, baby. I'm booked, I gotta go. Crying, baby. Honey, do you wanna go? I mean that same old place, my sweet home Chicago. Well, 2 and 2 is 4. 4 and 2 is 6. I got to get there, baby. Get there quick. Crying, baby. Honey, do you wanna go? I mean that living life city, my sweet home Chicago. Thank you. So, where do we think the blues came from? Well, lots of sources. I mean, one of them was work songs and field hollers. People were working in the fields, cotton fields, wheat fields, whatever they were working in, cornfields, working on railroad lines, working on logging camps. There were songs that they sang, and they were encouraged to do this to keep them in rhythm. So you might be swinging an axe, and you would want everybody to swing the axe together. And that would be there would be a point at the song where everybody would swing, and it would be a very rhythmic thing, and it kept a pace, you know. And these were called work songs. I can do a little bit of something for you. Let's see. You know, John Henry got to work all day under the sun, under the sun. You know John Henry got to work all day, never be done, never be done. And it'll go on like that. So where I'm clapping would be where the axe falls, right? Or the hammer falls, or that kind of a thing. Or maybe where you pull something, work songs. And field hollers were a very similar sort of a thing. Another common source, we believe, for the blues is gospel music, really church music. And you hear a lot of blues where melodies that occurred in hymns and that kind of a thing in churches were really transposed lyrically to fit a blues form. One of the great early blues players, one of my favorites, is a man named Son House. And he lived later in his life, he lived in Rochester, but he's a Mississippi blues man. A good friend of mine actually knew him, lived on the same street as him. And he did two types of music. He did blues and he did gospel music. And when he was drinking, he did blues. When he wasn't drinking, he did gospel music. This is simply the way it was. So here's one of his sober songs. He was a great player. Let me see if I can do this for you. You have a part here, and I really need you to do this part. The part will go, John the Revelator. That's all you have to sing. Try that with me. John the Revelator. This is a story about the Bible, John the Revelator. Okay? So tell me who's that writing? John the Revelator. Tell me who's that writing? John the Revelator. Tell me who's that writing? John the Revelator wrote the book of the seven seals. Well, God walked down in the cool of the day, called at him by his name. Well, he refused to answer, 'cause he was naked and ashamed. Tell me who's that writing? John the Revelator. Tell me who's that writing? John the Revelator. Tell me who's that writing? John the Revelator wrote the book of the seven seals. Jesus had 12 disciples. Mary and Martha went down to see. So go tell my disciples, ooh, meet me in Galilee. Tell me who's that writing? John the Revelator. Tell me who's that writing? John the Revelator. Ooh, who's that writing? John the Revelator wrote the book of the seven seals. Oh, you're great. You're going to be fun. Excellent. So, work songs, field hollers, gospel music. A lot of influences from stuff like country and folk music and minstrel shows. I'm sure we all know what those things are. All pervaded into this West African music and created a whole new genre. Now, at one point, probably I would say like the later 30s and the 40s, farming and that kind of a thing became less and less important in America, and machines and the Industrial Revolution that took place and cities, what was happening in cities, became more the centers for people. And a lot of people from the South began moving up north, cities like Detroit, Chicago, New York, because there were jobs available and there was a better pay available. It's not much different than the kind of thing that happens today. But when that happened, of course, their music went along with them. Now, the thing that happened here is the early blues was pretty free in form, all right? So by in form, I mean, here you have a 12-measure structure. Let's take a look at this for a second. Get out of my own way here. So I don't know how well you can see this, but these would be measures of music. Here's one measure right here, okay? Sometimes we call that a bar.
Yeah, that's our
I need to get the mic. Yeah. So 12 measures of music, and this would be one measure. Oh. I have been using microphones all my life, but one of the things you have to do is look. So, like this? Yeah. Okay. So this this would be one measure of music. This would be two measures, and sometimes this is just called a bar. So bar 1, bar 2, or measure 3, measure 4, measure 5. 12 measures is a very common form for the blues. But at first, before it was citified, if you will excuse the expression, the blues was really a more free form kind of music. And a lot of these forms that were used came from West Africa. There were 13 measure forms, 15 measure forms, 17 measure forms, that to the person who is used to rock and roll or pop radio or that kind of a thing, you're used to a more specific ordering, a more mathematical ordering that wasn't happening there. It wasn't like they couldn't keep time. It was what they heard. They heard those different forms because that was their culture. Now, when they went up to the city, something happened. Before I go into that, let me play a song for you by Robert Johnson, who was one of the great early blues players. And losing my things here. And he played sometimes what's called a slide. That's what this is, you see. So you put it on your finger. Some people use it here. I like it here because you can still fret with these fingers. What do I mean by fretting? Well, when I play a guitar, I know it's hard to see this very clearly from way back there, but if I play, let's say this note, I'm pushing that string down to touch the fingerboard. And the string will resonate against this metal bar, which is called a fret. So it doesn't matter if I'm back here a little bit or up here, it still only goes against that fret, all right? And that's the intonation or the tone that I will get. If I play it with a slide, I'm not fretting, so to speak. I'm not pressing. I'm touching the string. Okay, if I press, it sounds like that. And the intonation or the intuneness of the note will change as I move away from or above that fret. So, you hear that? I'm in the same fret. I'm in the same, between the same two frets. So, slide is a little tricky that way because you have to intone the notes as you play. Robert Johnson was a great slide player, and this is a slide song called Come in My Kitchen. And you will hear that the measuring is not really like this. There are odd measures in the piece. So let me play the song for you. You better come on in my kitchen. Well, there's bound to be rain in our door. There's a time coming, I know it's so. Can't make the winter, it's doggone cold. You better come in my kitchen. Well, there's bound to be rain outdoors. Woman gets in trouble Everybody throws her down, looking for a good friend. None can be found. You better come on in my kitchen. There's bound to be rain in our door. My baby's gone, I know she won't come back to the last nickel from her nation's side. You better come on in my kitchen. Well, there's bound to be rain outdoors. You better come on in my kitchen. You know there's bound to be raining outdoors. Okay, so thank you. So you could hear, I'm sure, that the ordering of the measures, and there's pauses and there's lengthening of spots and stuff like that, is a little different than what I first played, that 12-bar shuffle, Sweet Home Chicago. I bought this in a music store, but people that early on played slide used different things, sometimes a broken bottleneck, sometimes just a piece of steel or a knife, things like that. Anything you could find that would do that. And if you didn't have a guitar, there was something called a diddly bow that is actually a West African instrument. What people used to do is they would take a piece of, say, baling wire, and they would tack it against the wall of a shack or the wall of a house or anything like that, even a tree. At the other end, they would tie it onto a rock, something heavy, and stretch it out so that it was taut so that they could get a tone. And then you would take the slide and slide it up and down the neck. And you probably heard me do this in this last song. You better come on in my kitchen, like that. And they would do that on one string. And it's called a diddly bow, predecessor of the slide. So, I mentioned that people were going north, and of course they took their music with them and wanted to play music. Down south, people played in groups, and they understood how to hear where someone was going to change. When you play music, you generally have what are called chords, especially in this sort of a thing, where the chord, that's a chord, accompanies the melody. And the chords change throughout. I don't know if any of you have heard of a 1-4-5 progression, but that's a very common chord in music and a very common chord in the blues particularly. So the 1-4-5 would be E, A, B in this key, in the key of E. In C, it'd be C, F, and G. In G, it'd be G, C, and D. 1-4-5 are the notes in the major scale, actually. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, do, so. Well, let me find the key here. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, so do is the one chord, the chord that is built on the first note in that scale. The 4 chord is built on the 4th note in that scale. The 5 chord is built on the 5th note in that scale. So from, you get used to accompany a melody. 1-4-5 is a very common progression in the blues. And it would look like this. See? I'm a learner, I can learn. Okay, so what I just laid out for you in that song was E, A, and B, and we use sevenths. I won't get into that, but it would look like this. E7, and then we would repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. So that's the first four measures. Then it would shift to A7, repeat it, back to E7 for measure 7, repeat it, B7, measure 9, measure 10, A7, measure 11, E7, and back up usually, not always, to a B7 here at measure 12. This section is called a turnaround because you go from the 1 to the 5. The 5 chord has the effect of making you want to go back to the 1 chord. In the ear, that's the effect of it. I don't want to get into an explanation of why it works that way, but it does. And so at this point, you would just repeat back to here. And the form will go on and on like this, all right? So that's a 12-bar blues. That's what began to happen more and more as people moved north and played together, because now they could have electronic instruments, electric guitar, they could use piano, they could use drums, which was key, they could use electric bass if they wanted, they could use horns, they didn't have those in the South. And so, the effect of this is you got maybe 5, 4, 6 people playing together. They need to know where the changes are going to happen, all right? So things began to straighten out so people could play together more easily. And you, excuse me, and you understand in those situations, I might play with one band one night, I might play with another band another night, I might play with a guy in the street in the afternoon, I might play in another club that evening. Okay, so, and always different people, changeable parts. And so you needed something that everybody could fit into more easily. And this, I don't think it was a discussion that this happened. I think it was a necessity that this happened. It was just the way things were and the way they developed. And so we wound up with a 12-bar blues being probably the most dominant form in the blues even today. So let's go back to Sweet Home Chicago a bit, and let's look at this. Here's the E7, top 4 measures, then A7 to E7, okay, and then B7, A7, E7, B7, 5, 4, 1, 5. So. You hear when I'm on this chord, it doesn't want to really stay there. It wants to go back to this. It's a natural resolution. And this is what happens in blues, and it really happens in music in general. So we can use a numerical system to translate the chords that I've written here to be this. 1, 4, 1, and which way am I doing it? 5, 4, 1. I know I'm supposed to use the microphone here, but sorry. So that's the numerical system for what those chords are. Now you take any key in the blues. If I want to go to C, that numerical system holds 1, 4, 5. So now C is the 1, F is the 4, G is the 5, and so on. All right, this will work for any of the keys. So it's a very easy system once you understand the 1-4-5 in each key. You can pretty much in the blues play along with anything if you're a player, you know. You can do chords if you play notes. You can do that stuff. So, moving up to the cities changed everything. At this point, it might be good if we have a little Q&A. I don't know if any of you have questions, but it's a good time. They can be about anything, but you know, particularly anything that I've said this afternoon. I'd be interested to know what your questions might be or your comments. Anything? Yes.
That slide that you used.
Yeah.
The sound it made.
I'm sorry?
The sound that was making. The sound you made with that.
This is made.
Yeah. The sound that was making with it.
Yes.
Did that develop into the electric guitar by using?
Is it? I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time hearing.
Did it develop into the electric guitar?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If I had an electric guitar here, I would play it with you. Yes.
Did that develop the electric?
Yes. 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 So, you know, to a degree, a guitar is a guitar in the sense that it's going to have the strings, it's going to have the frets, and as long as you have that, you can do that. And the technique is the same for electric. What you find with electric is it's a little touchier because it's louder, and the strings, because of the pickups, are a little more active. Doesn't take as much work to make sound out of an electric as it does for an acoustic guitar. So one of the issues with a slide is always dampening the strings. If I want this note, and I just slide it along all the strings, you hear the other noise there? So you don't so much want that. What you do is drag the fingers behind the slide along and dampen those other strings, so now you don't hear it. If I take them away, you hear all that other noise. So now, did I answer your question okay? Is there more? Okay. Yes?
I was wondering why Robert Johnson never got, like, the credit he deserved.
Ah. Well, you know, look, he was probably pretty happy with what happened. He went to, I think it was in San Antonio where he did his recordings, probably 1934, around there. So what happened is a scout or some scouts from a record company would go down to the areas around there, and they would search out certain people. They would talk to people and find out who the big blues players were. And they only wanted blues. I mean, Robert Johnson played a lot of stuff. He played Bing Crosby songs. He played stuff that was on the radio, played country songs. He was a good player. He was very versed. But these companies wanted blues. They wanted to sell a certain genre, not unlike companies today. So what happened is they sent these scouts down. They would fish out different players, and they would say, come to such and such hotel tomorrow at such and such a time. They would audition them, and the player would play maybe 5, 6 pieces for him, and he'd say, okay, I want the first one and the third one. We'll do it tomorrow. And this would be the process. And they would come in the next day and probably do 2 takes of that song, and that would be it, and they would get $50 a take. Back then, 1934, $50 just for the session wasn't bad money, all right? $50 was probably way more than you paid in rent. So not bad money. But then comes royalties. They did not get those, and I think that's where you're going with that, you know? And so they had to sign off on that kind of a thing. And it's a shame. This has not only happened in the blues, it's happened in lots of music. I mean, Chuck Berry in rock and roll fought for a lot of his royalties, you know. Different people have had this go around with record companies. So that is what happened, and it happened with all the players, any of those players, you know, Lightnin' Hopkins, Blind Willie Johnson, all those players had pretty much the same deal going on. a good question. Yeah.
What was your favorite song that you played?
My favorite song in the blues? That's so hard. That's so hard. I don't know. I like Muddy Waters a lot as a blues player, and I like to play his songs. I have some of my own that I play. I like Robert Johnson songs a lot. So I don't think, to be honest, that I could choose only one. You know, it's like, what's your favorite sandwich, or what's your favorite cookie, or what's your favorite, I don't know. You know, it's very difficult for me. Some people can do it. I'm not one of them. I'm sorry. Have you heard any of those people? Muddy Waters? You can go on YouTube and find them. They're definitely out there. Muddy Waters and who else? Robert Johnson would be on YouTube. Those are two good guys to start with if you want to get the blues. To get this music, it's valuable to really go back to the roots of it, to the early. I mean, blues was going on a long time before it was recorded, because they didn't have that process, till, really they weren't recording blues till W.C. Handy, which was like 1902. All right, so there was blues going on in the 19th century, but we have no idea what it sounded like, and that's part of the difficulty in determining what the early stuff was like. But go on YouTube and check some of those out. Just punch in blues players or blues artists. You'll get some interesting stuff. What else you got? Okay, you want to hear something? Want to hear something else? Okay. Yeah, I'll play a little Robert Johnson. This is kind of my my take on one of his songs. The blues was often referred to as devil's music. We've heard that about rock and roll. We've heard that about jazz. None of that's true. It's just music. It expresses what people feel and think and say. Some good, some bad. It's just what people do. It's crazy to think like that, but it's still there. This one will have the evil man himself mentioned, so don't let it upset you. Early this morning, I heard a knock upon my door. Early this morning, I heard a knock upon my door. I said, hello, Satan. I believe it's time we go. Me and the devil, we was walking side by side. Me and the devil, walking side by side. I mistreated my baby, good Lord, and I just can't be satisfied. You can bury my body by the old highway side. Bury my body by the old highway side. So's that old evil spirit take a Greyhound bus and ride. There you go. Thank you. So now, let's talk about the lyric a little bit in the blues. That was kind of pretty much a 12-bar form, what I did right there. And so we were in the key of A. So the 1, 4, 5, which I was talking about, would be A, D, and E. Or in the blues, usually A7, D7, E7. All right, so that's what you heard here. Here's the A7, D7, E7, and back. Okay? So now the lyric in the blues is pretty simple in a sense. What you really have is you take one line, okay? I wrote out a simple thing that I'll look at here. Let's suppose the first line is, what did you see last night? So let's do that. What did you see? What did you see last night? Okay, that's the first 4 measures up there, right? Now it's going to shift to the 4 chord. I'm in E, so we're going to shift to A. What did you see? What did you see last night? That's the next 4, okay? A to E, or 4 to 5. So we have the top 2 lines, and what you notice in the lyric is the first line repeated. Very common in the blues. This is really, and then the third line is going to be the answer or the complement to the first 2 lines. So, and it will usually rhyme. So our ending word is night. What did you see? What did you see last night? Okay, night is the last word. Anybody come up with a third line for this? Think about it for a second. Oh, hurry.
I seen a great fright.
Oh, very good. Okay, so what did you see? What did you see last night? What did you see? What did you see last night? I saw a great, great fight. So that works. That's the blues. Yeah. Let's try another one. What did you do? What did you do today? What did you do? What did you do today? Okay. What did you do? Good. What did you do today? What did you do? What did you do today? I got down on my knees, got down my knees to pray. Okay. Let's do another. That was excellent. Let's do another one. Let's see. What will you do? What will you do when you get home? What will you do when you get home? That is the key, what rhymes with home. That'll give you the whole rest of the line, right?
Lay on my bed and put down my phone.
Go lay on my bed, put down my phone. Good, Marty. Marty Wimmer, by the way, one of the hosts here at WNED.
You know, John, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
You know, I didn't grow up listening, to a lot of blues, but growing up when I did in the 70s and 80s, it seemed like a lot of pop and rock songs. If you really listen, you can hear the 12-bar blues.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. So here's the shuffle. Okay, you hear that? Here it is in rock. Same notes. All I'm doing is straightening out the rhythm. I mean, I listen to country now. When I first was listening to country, it was like Hank Williams was the guy and guys like that, and I loved that stuff. Now country is kind of rock with an accent. So sure, you hear this all the time. I can't, off the top of my head, play one of those songs that I've heard it in, but yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, and this scale, called a pentatonic scale, 5 different notes. The notes are. And the thing about this scale is you can start it anywhere using those 5 notes and it will sound fine. Here I'm starting on the 2nd tone. Here I'll start on the 3rd tone. Right? Still sounds fine no matter where you start it. There's no half steps if you're a musician and you know this stuff, there's no half steps. So a half step is like from up 1 pitch. A whole step is up 2 pitches. So this has up a minor 3rd, which is 3 pitches, up a whole step, up a whole step, up a minor 3rd. And so it doesn't have those half steps, which makes it more difficult to start the scale in any certain place. I'm getting a little technical here, but I think you're following me. I see a lot of nodding going on. Yes, Marty?
I just wanted to add, if anybody ever wanted to play a pentatonic scale, walk up to
Black
the
keys.
piano and just play the black keys. and
Yep.
You're gonna get one, and it's gonna sound good. And if you ever wanna make anybody think you're a fabulous pianist, just play the black keys. That'd be great.
Absolutely right. I remember doing that when I was a kid. I knew nothing, but everything sounded good on the black keys, sounded nice. So what else?
Hey, can you take us through when you were starting out as a kid in music? Kind of what did you do? How did you learn?
Absolutely, I can. I was, I'm self-taught, and I've gone after a lot of knowledge. Well, I'll get to that. So when I was a little kid, I was always gravitating to it, and my parents were not particularly musical. My father could sing a little bit, had a nice voice, really. My mom almost never sang. I never heard her, and I didn't hear them playing music in the house. It was TV. TV was the thing. But when my sister, I was about 8, I think she started taking piano lessons. I think it was through school. We had to get a piano. I think we rented that piano. And I went right after it when nobody was around, and I would pick out melodies that I had heard and stuff like that by ear, a lot of trial and error, because I didn't really understand the keyboard per se. But I started doing that, and then my uncle gave me a harmonica, and I learned to play that. And then I was a teenager, and drums held a particular fascination for me. So I started, first I was banging on, we had coffee cans with those plastic lids. So I'd use a couple of pencils and play those. I had different sizes, and they would have different sounds. And I used a pot lid for a cymbal, and the floor was the kick drum, that kind of thing. So, and then I got a real set of drums when I was learning, and I was in some little bands when I was about 15, that kind of thing, neighborhood things, you know. And then I found guitar. What happened was I was trying to write songs, and I didn't know anything about chords or anything, how to tell anybody what I was interested. I would just, I knew where I wanted to sing it, so I would say to a guitar player in the band, what's that second chord in the Rolling Stones song, Paint It Black? And he'd say, this, and I said, yeah, that's the first chord. And then what's that? And I would go like this, and I thought, this is ridiculous. So I went and got a guitar for $13 in a music store. It was terrible, but I loved it. You know, it was really hard to play. But I learned to play on it, so I could tell the guys what I wanted in these songs. And it turned out that I just fell in love with playing guitar, and that's been the thing ever since. So I guess if there's a moral there in terms of instruments, try everything, you know, and you find something that resonates with you. You know, might not be guitar, but it might be. Maybe it's oboe, you know, maybe it's flute, maybe it's piano. So, were you raising your hand or scratching? Okay. Okay, so that was it. And then, you know, I learned enough. I was starting to play gigs. And as I went on, I realized that I could play gigs, and I was getting paid to play gigs and that kind of thing. But I didn't really know what I was doing. You know, I wanted to know more about it. I became friends with some jazz players and some classical players that I met, and was picking their brain. And then I was going down to the library downtown. They have a wonderful music library downtown. And I was going down there and reading the stuff that I found, biographies, manuals on arranging, all sorts of different things, you know, because really I was just interested in all that stuff. So for me, it's never been about a style. As much as I love the blues, it's not all I play, it's not all I want to play. It's not about a style, it's about music in general. I just love music, you know, and want to just play it. Yeah. Long answer, I'm sorry about that, but.
So, just quick follow-up, so it sounds like, I mean, when you say self-taught, you were all the way self-taught. Like, it didn't sound like you had formal music theory training?
No, when I was about 24, I realized I wanted to read music, and I got interested in a little classical. So a friend of mine was a very talented classical player, and I took about 4 lessons from him just to get on board with the reading and the whole thing. And then whenever I'd say, okay, what's that sign mean? You know, I could just talk to him, and he would hit me to it. Joel Perry was his name, great player. And yes.
I just have another question. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. I'm kind of there.
What was the scene like in Buffalo?
The scene in Buffalo? I was playing acoustic. Well, you know, I was a drummer before that, but I didn't really play in clubs because I wasn't old enough to get into them. So we played a couple of like church dances, a couple of neighborhood parties, things like that. In the clubs, people wanted bands overall. I found this was like mid-60s, all right? And then, you know, around the 70s, acoustic became big. You know, Dylan was huge, James Taylor hit, a lot of acoustic players, Joni Mitchell, and people wanted to hear that stuff. And so you could get more acoustic work in a bar. Before that, people wanted bands more than acoustic guitar, I found. But the scene itself was different. I found that there was fewer distractions, fewer people looking at their phones, fewer people watching a TV. You know, when I played in a bar, I would ask the owner if he could turn the TV off, because I'm up there, I'm just one guy singing a song the best I can, and you got this multi-billion-dollar thing competing with me. And that's really hard, and people are still like fire worshipers. So the thing is bright, and we're going to look at it, you know. So you didn't have as many competing factors, I think, you know, and people actually sat more and listened. I can't tell you why that is compared to now. You know, and we're talking clubs, we're talking bars, you know. People actually sat and listened more, I found, and like I said, I can't tell you why, but that's a difference.
It could be because of the purpose why you go to a club today.
Well, you go for a lot of reasons. Yeah, yeah. Food, drink, to meet people, meet new people, you know, get out of the house, get away from your husband. So, all that stuff, yeah. Was there more to it?
I just wanted to ask, excuse me, but along the scene in Buffalo, if I may get into a delicate topic, what was the racial mix? Was it all white clubs here, all black clubs there?
Yeah.
Was it
Yeah, there was a very little mix.
Did you go into the black clubs? Did you?
Yeah.
know the musicians?
Yeah. At times, not as much, well, more so when I began playing a lot of blues. Blues wasn't my first music that I played out. It was more like first kind of folky stuff or acoustic stuff or rock stuff like British Invasion stuff and things like that. And those avenues just didn't seem open to me, or I didn't know about them as much, you know. When I started playing blues more, then I was getting booked on the east side and in clubs that were not just white clubs, but were black clubs and that kind of thing. And also, there's a lot more. I still think that it's very prejudiced out there, to be perfectly frank, but it's a lot better, and there's a lot more, you know, I don't think people have as much tendency to only go with their own people as they did, so it's a little better that way. But it's still kind of a mess, isn't it? Yeah.
Since you also played the harmonica, did you play them both together?
I did, yeah, you know, if I did a Dylan song or something like that, or a Neil Young song, early on, I would do them both. That's tricky. Do you play?
No.
Yeah.
Now there's-
Well, that's tricky because, you know, first of all, you're singing and playing. That's tricky right there because you don't want to play the same rhythm that you're singing. And you have to learn independence. You learn the independence on guitar, and then you learn the independence with the voice, and you put them together. You don't want, if I sing, baby don't, so I don't want to play, baby don't you want to go, right? That's terrible. Yeah, that's terrible. And so the same thing happens with harmonica. You don't want to play what you're playing on guitar, what you're playing with the harmonica. You don't want to match it rhythmically. You know, it's kind of like when you learn piano, you learn left hand, you can back me up here, you learn left hand, you learn right hand, then you put them together, hands together, I believe it's called. And you kind of do that singing and playing, and you would do it with the harmonica and guitar. You got to know what you're playing real well, or just be really adept that you can improvise on one while you're accompanying with the other.